We will make America great again. Thank you, Arizona. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you.
You have been listening to President Trump wrapping up his campaign rally for 2020 here in Phoenix. 12 News back on the air. We promised that we weren't going to break into America's Got Talent unless violence broke out, and sadly, that's exactly what's happened. As the Trump supporters started filing out of the Phoenix Convention Center almost immediately after the president's speech, they ran into Trump protesters who had been outside the entire time in that heat. Words were exchanged. We understand perhaps a flashbang has gone off. We don't know if any tear gas has been used, but we do have crews stationed on the ground to bring you the best coverage.
That's right. We're going to head out live to Kevin Kennedy, who is nearby where some of this action is taking place. Kevin, what's happening where you're at?
Well, I can tell you right now, you can probably hear the Phoenix Police Department is shooting some tear gas into a crowd of people that are not wanting to disperse. You can see the group of police officers walking towards them. I'm going to run that way. I'm going to tell you right now that if you're having trouble hearing me, because it is very difficult. We're essentially running into the tear gas. I can tell you we've heard at least 4 or 5 flashbangs go off. There's another one right there. This is on 3rd Street and Monroe. You can see that large group of police officers that are heading that way. I can tell you, well, you can really smell this tear gas or gas. You can probably see it right there. Officers are shooting tear gas into the air. They're also spraying what appears to be some sort of pepper spray. That's probably about the 5th or 6th time I've heard some sort of tear gas. Once again, we're on the corner of 3rd Street and Monroe. We don't know exactly what kind of instigated this situation, but for whatever reason, Phoenix police officers decided to go ahead and fire off a couple of gas bombs or tear gas or something along those lines to kind of get this crowd moving. As you can see, this wall of Phoenix police officers right there on the corner. There's a massive amount of gas on the corner of 3rd Street and Monroe, where looks like a lot of people excuse me,
Kevin,
are still trying to kind of fight through it.
That's about where we believe Kevin is right now, so just a little bit down the street, down 3rd Street. Here, though, we do not see tear gas. I don't feel anything in my eyes. So for the moment, things just very tense and very loud here. That's all I can report from this particular location. We're on the south side of the Phoenix Convention Center, 3rd Street and Washington.
All right, Ryan, thank you so much. We're going to head back out to Kevin Kennedy, who is live where some of that tear gas is being dispersed. Right now, you can see Kevin covering his mouth. Kevin, it looks like you're pretty close to where that tear gas is being dispensed there. Do you have any idea of why police decided to do that in the area that you're at?
Yeah, don't know why. Our only guess is that for whatever reason, they wanted a crowd of protesters to disperse, and that crowd probably was not dispersing. We're on Monroe Street between 2nd Street excuse me, and 3rd Street. Most of the activity appears to be on the corner of 3rd Street and Monroe. That's where you can see a large group of police officers. Obviously, we're blocked off right now. They've essentially kind of set up a blue wall where we are in the middle of Monroe Street between 2nd Street and 3rd Street. Looks like there's a bigger crowd of officers over there exactly on the corner. Once again, not exactly sure what kind of triggered that, but you can certainly see the large plume of smoke. Let me go ahead and get our photographer to pan up. You can certainly see the large plume of smoke from tear gas that they deployed. We've heard at least probably 6 or 7 bangs, excuse me, is my guess, but not exactly sure at this point why. Only can assume that it was because for whatever reason a crowd was not dispersing like Phoenix police wanted them to, and that's why they go ahead and set those off. Karina, Mark, back to you.
We are being told that the reason why police had to dispense that tear gas was because the protesters that were out there were throwing rocks and bottles at police.
Yeah, the police are not going to use tear gas to break up nonviolent crowds. What I'm hearing tonight from my sources is that the police began receiving rocks and bottles being thrown at them, some type of gas-like, tear-like device as well deployed against the police. At that point, not only are their lives at risk, but the people they're supposed to protect as well if they can't do their job. Hence, we're seeing about 4 volleys of tear gas so far tonight.
President Trump, who was inside with his supporters, thousands of them, for almost an hour and a half. And then you had this huge mass of protesters that were outside. Eventually, the supporters had to file out into possibly areas where they had these people protesting. And so would you say that this was kind of a point where everybody would be on guard for something to happen?
Certainly when the event is ending, that's the last chance for those in the crowd who want to make trouble to make their trouble.
And it just takes really one person to set off kind of a chain reaction of events.
Right. We saw a young woman who was obviously in distress, having water poured on her face and eyes, especially after getting a whiff of the tear gas.
Kevin, how have things progressed in the area where you are?
Well, we have moved back. Police have actually moved everybody back on Monroe Street from 3rd Street on the corner where that tear gas initially went off. You know, you can't just get it out. I mean, you kind of have to choke it up. And that's what I did. I can't speak for Phil, but I kind of had to choke it up or what have you. It's much better now. I've been able to kind of get out of that initial kind of wave of tear gas that kind of hit us. So things are a little bit better right now. But, boy, when that hits you, it really packs a punch. And as I said, a number of people I saw were overcome by it, literally kind of on the ground crying and tears watering and choking and gagging. It was very, very difficult to breathe and to see.
Kevin, you mentioned that there's a crowd there of about maybe a few hundred.
Boy, it certainly seems like there's a fringe element out here, and now they've kind of pointed their frustration, if you want to call it that, to police officers. And there is certainly an anger that is taking place right now, and it certainly seems to be directed at the police department.
I mentioned earlier that police are doing a great job of keeping each side of the street separated. Now, across the way, Nick, if you can pan over there, you see the Donald Trump flag and a lot of the Make America Great signs. Those people are in direct opposition to the protesters on this side. But again, it's just talk. It's a lot of banter back and forth. Police are keeping it separate. You can see the heavy, heavy presence of Phoenix police officers here, some of them wearing helmets and shields. And that's really the difference right now.
I want to go back out to Kevin Kennedy, who is about to talk with one of the folks caught up in that protest tonight. Kev?
Yeah, guys, as you can probably see, the protesters are still out here right now directing a lot of their ire at the Phoenix police officers. I'm joined here by Sadie. Sadie, you were on 3rd Street, or on 2nd Street, excuse me, when the tear gas initially went, but then you walked that way. What did you see and what was it like?
So as I walked towards 3rd Street and Monroe, I started seeing more cops coming towards me, and then more tear gas, or whatever that gas was. A lot of people were coughing. I tried to take another route, and then a cop guy came screaming and yelling at me, telling me to go away, and I turned to him and I told him, like, you don't need to yell at me, I'm just walking. And
There's another one right now, guys.
A lot of this, these protesters are protesting against police, which is surprising because in Charlottesville, obviously, we had the people that were there protesting the removal of the statues and things like that. Here, this seems to be, and I could be wrong, really aimed at police.
It seems to be that way because the message for Trump has come and gone. He's left the facility, he's back at his hotel, and yet the only people they're engaging with are the law enforcement officers who are there to protect the protesters.
So these people obviously coming for trouble.
Exactly. You will find this frequently. There's people who don't like the police simply because they're police, and yet they have one job tonight, to keep people safe.
Right, because if they were here just to simply protest, they wouldn't be, inciting violence toward the police, throwing rocks and throwing bottles at them.
We've got tear gas going off, flashbang grenades, which can stun you, render you temporarily deaf. If you were an honest protester who made your point, time to go home.
Right.
Time to leave. If you're sticking around engaging the police, you're somebody that probably deserves to be arrested by the end of the night.
People have acted more aggressively against police?
Absolutely. There have always been people in my law enforcement career who don't like the police, but it's gotten worse over the past few years.
And you're looking at some live pictures right now from up above, and you can see there how police are trying to advance the crowd, push them to the south, I believe is what Kevin Kennedy was telling us, and basically just continue to push them away from the area where we initially heard that some of the protesters were throwing rocks and bottles at police.
Let's go back to Kevin Kennedy, who I think we've fixed his microphone problems, and let's try Kevin again.
And Buren, we're basically right outside the 12 News studios right now. You can actually see the wall of Phoenix police that have kind of pushed this crowd back. I can't tell you that this crowd is significantly dispersed, but there is still a number of people here. I'm going to guesstimate probably about 100 or so people that are still here, and Phoenix police just kind of continue to move us back or what have you. I've seen about 2 or 3 tear gases set off in about the past maybe 3 to 5 minutes. But right now, pretty much the crowd has been dispersed from Monroe. Now we're up on Van Buren, and you can see that long line of that wall of police right now. They've essentially kind of set up shop or kind of like stopped that line right there on Van Buren and 2nd Street. So right now, they're not moving forward anymore. The crowd is dispersed a little bit, but there's still quite a few people that are still here. Mark, I'll toss it back to you guys.
Okay, and John, as you look at these images, and this is literally outside of the front door of the 12 News studios,
Keep your shot up.
they've stopped advancing. Is this an opportunity for all of these protesters who perhaps were throwing bottles and rocks at police 20 minutes ago, which again set off this chain reaction with the tear gas and the flashbangs? By stopping their advancement, is this the protesters' opportunity, and are the police saying to them, this is your last chance to go home?
This is the police pushing them out and making it clear, you can go home, nothing's going to happen, but if you continue throwing rocks and bottles, the police are going to continue to advance. You can see them walking forward now because it's time for them to move out of the area. The evening is over. It's time for everybody to get in their cars and leave.
What's the next step, John, if these people don't disperse?
If there are particular agitators in the group that are inspiring others to commit acts, there's specifically police techniques in a line like this where they will extract the agitators from the crowd, take them into custody, and hopefully that will cause other persons in this protest to leave the area and not want to do these types of acts any further.
And that's the one thing we haven't heard any statistics, and hopefully by the time we get around to 10 o'clock, we'll have some numbers if there have been any arrests tonight. But looking at this, it would be hard to believe there haven't been some.
Right. And it looks like a lot of police presence. I mean, is this proportionate, would you say, to the size of protesters that we had outside of the Phoenix Convention Center, or even just to this group?
Everyone in law enforcement in this city tonight has either been called into work or is on standby to come in immediately, perhaps being held back at the stations to be deployed. They've brought in everyone now because you want to keep the city safe. We haven't heard anything about damage to businesses, glass windows, etc. The city wants to keep it that way, and so they're using all the resources they have.
They did not want another Charlottesville to happen.
Certainly they didn't want another Charlottesville. They didn't want to give an opportunity for that. And you can see they're pushing them past your building now. And that tear gas that's being deployed as we speak is not pleasant. So there's really no reason for anyone to stick around.
All right. Well, we're hearing that Kevin Kennedy is standing by.
And this is literally...
It's right outside of our studio.
Right.
Well, I mean, if we walked out the door, we could probably get affected by some of that tear gas.
When we do walk out the door later tonight, we'll be walking into that.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll be over by then.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, let's head out. There you go. You
More
see
tear
another
gas.
and more tear gas being deployed there. So,
Hey guys, I can say this is starting to get intense. Now, the good news is the crowd is basically dispersed from 2nd Street and Van Buren, so only a few people are still here. But let me go ahead and point something out to you. There was a number of cars that actually came down the street. You see this white car right here in front of me? Somebody was inside that car. They were just trying to get down the street. That's when officers started throwing tear gas and flashbangs. As you can see, nobody's in that right now. I can only assume that they were overcome by that tear gas and essentially just kind of jumped out of the car and took off to avoid that tear gas. I can tell you in the past maybe 2 to 3 minutes, I've heard at least 4 or 5 flashbangs, and I've seen at least probably about 3 or 4 canisters of tear gas thrown. I can also tell you that it seems like there's a chance that some of these protesters or fringe protesters, whatever you want to call it, also have some things that they've been throwing. And it seems like it's more than just water bottles. It appears at least at times something's been going over towards the police officer that kind of appears to be some sort of gas as well. And you can hear that's another flashbang that just went off. But I can tell you, at least for the most part, it does seem like things have kind of calmed down here just a little bit. I know it's tough to say that when you hear that flashbang go off, but the crowd is certainly much smaller than it was even just 5-10 minutes ago, guys.
and Kevin, you mentioned that white car that was trying to pass through. They deployed the tear gas, and you said that the driver got out of the car. Did the police approach that person after they got out of the vehicle?
Could not tell. I can say it looks like somebody got back into that car and they're now leaving. So whoever was jumped into that car was able to go ahead and get back in it and kind of turn around and drive away.
We're going to head over to Tram Mai. She has a look at what is playing out on social media. So let's go to that right now. Okay.
All right, Caribe, I'll take it from here. We are live in the Alert Center right now, and I can tell you I've been monitoring what has been feeding online on Twitter, and what started out as just supporters and protesters talking about, you know, Trump's speech during the rally and everything, and so many memes quickly escalated into a lot of video that has been captured by a number of people. You're watching one of them right here, all the violence that has been erupting. So it is quite scary. And again, you are looking at some of the video that a lot of these people downtown have been capturing and putting on Twitter. Using the hashtag Phoenix Rally, as well as Phoenix Rally Violence as well. So again, a lot of tense moments up here, and we'll send it back to you guys down in the studio.
Boy, it looks like a war zone when you look at some of this video that's been posted on social media.
We're going to head out to Ryan Cody. Ryan, we see a lot of movement going on behind you. What's happening?
So what just happened a few minutes ago was the Phoenix Police Department officially told the crowd here, the protesters, to disperse. They started pushing some of the people backwards up the staircase. You see there's an arrest being made at the moment with a young woman who sitting down on the stairs, and they were pushing the protesters back, and then they started pushing back at police. And that is what we saw coming down the stairs. There was some pushing and shoving, and now we do see one woman is in handcuffs as police are moving everyone down the street. So that's all we know at the moment. They've been told to disperse, and that's what they're doing.
Yeah, guys, Phoenix police are now on the overhead loudspeaker with one of their police vehicles, basically telling the crowd that, look, this is an unlawful assembly and you must leave. They're saying go home, and obviously if you don't go home, certainly you could be arrested. So announcements are being made through the police officers' vehicles right now.
If there were mounted units in this town, they'd be using the mounted police because people get out of the way for a horse. But that's why they've brought the cars in. And you can see they're starting to inch their way forward to those who wanted to sit in the street.
So it is almost like as if the cars were the horses leading the way for these officers in riot gear just behind them.
Exactly, but the cars are offering a lot of protection to the officers. They're certainly intimidating to the protesters. We can see some people finally starting to back away and get up and move from the street. The police have let them know it's time to go home. They've made the announcements over and over. Now they're putting it into action.
And those who don't leave will more than likely be arrested at this point.
If they're in the police way and they won't get up off the street, they will be taken into custody.
All right. I don't know if we can listen. All right, let's go back to Kevin Kennedy, who's right where this is happening, Kev.
Okay, guys, so now they've moved us past Van Buren Street. We're on 2nd Street, but we're heading our way away from Van Buren. Police have made a big push, or what have you, as you can probably see. We're basically at our side door, so we're about maybe a third of the way down 2nd Street for people that are at home watching right now. So the crowd is slowly kind of dissipating, walking back, as Phoenix police kind of made their way through the intersection at 2nd Street and Van Buren, are kind of pushing their way up 2nd Street to Fillmore. They've stopped right now, probably about maybe 50 to 100 feet past the intersection, but they did make a big push, and you can hear they are still making announcements, basically urging everybody and telling them they have to go home or they will be arrested. Guys?
Are the protesters, are they just moving back as police are pushing them that way, or are they actually dispersing and leaving?
You know, it certainly, from our vantage point, appears like they're just kind of moving back. I would assume that some periodically are dispersing, Caribe, but you can't really tell as they bounce around from one side of the street to the other, and they're not kind of all collected in one little area. It's tough to kind of tell if they're dispersing or they're just kind of moving about. But I can tell you that Phoenix police is still kind of slowly creeping their way down 2nd Street from Van Buren to Fillmore.
And so we were standing near 2nd Street in Monroe when those first two bangs happened, when the tear gas was deployed, and several people, including myself, started running in the opposite direction. It became extremely hard to breathe, and some folks were actually treated in the lobby of our building. And so the situation hopefully starting to calm back down. I'm going to toss it back inside to the studio to you guys.
Okay, Charlie. Charlie standing by there on Van Buren. just outside the station.
And here we are about an hour and a half after the president's speech, and we still have protesters outside and a police situation.
And we just want to thank all of you for staying with us as we now join 12 News at 10.
Now from the number 1 night team, breaking news.
I'm just walking.
It's now an unlawful assembly, and yet people are not moving.
And now they've kind of pointed their frustration, if you want to call it that, to police officers.
And Phoenix police actually starting to outnumber some of the civilians that are out here.
President Trump takes the stage at the Phoenix Convention Center.
Do the people in this room like Sheriff Joe?
The number 1 night team in action for you on this busy night.
12 News at 10 starts right now.
Good evening, everyone. 12 News at 10 tracking breaking news. Phoenix police dispersing tear gas, pepper balls, and spray to disperse crowds who started to throw rocks and bottles at police officers after President Trump's address at the Phoenix Convention Center. Phoenix police forming police lines trying to disperse the crowds.
And we had really wide-ranging crowds tonight, from peaceful protests, the pro-Trump folks, the anti-Trump folks, to a third group, perhaps, although we haven't confirmed it, the Antifa group, that really was the group that started throwing rocks and bottles at police, and that's when the flashbangs were dispersed, as well as the tear gas. And then later, perhaps a half hour ago, it wound up being a sit-in in front of the 12 News studios and a standoff that is still, to a certain extent, going on at 2nd Street and Van Buren.
That's right. And city officials and Phoenix law enforcement saying that they would have maximum numbers of police and law enforcement out there, and they would not be tolerating any violence. And we're seeing that tonight.
They followed through.
They followed through. Absolutely. Here's a live look right now from our camera. This is up above our building here at 200 East Van Buren, and really right outside our window here at the studio is where we still have a police situation going on, where police have been pushing the protesters back. They're fewer now than they were, say, maybe an hour or so ago, but we're still seeing some activity out there.
As John Iannarelli, the former FBI special agent in charge in Phoenix, pointed it out, I think it's been the word of the night when it comes to Phoenix police and how they've handled these unruly protesters who've thrown things. Restraint has been the key word tonight.
Yes.
They didn't want to arrest people, but in the end, there were some arrests made. Thousands of protesters were outside the convention center earlier tonight, and thousands of supporters were inside the convention center. President Trump delivered a campaign-style speech touching on a very, very wide range of issues, and is his style. He pulled no punches tonight.
We have the very best team coverage headed your way tonight. This happening right outside our 12 News studios, as we mentioned.
Kevin Kennedy has been in the middle of all of the action for the entire night, making his way from 3rd Street in Monroe near the convention center to now outside of our studios. Kevin kicks off our live team coverage.
All right. We're going to try to get back to Kevin here in just a moment. But first, let's head out to Ryan Cody, who was just a short time ago showing us protesters that were asked by Phoenix police to leave, officially being told to leave. And there was an arrest happening as we were on his live shot. So let's check in with him now and see what the situation looks like there.
Yeah, the protesters here were asked to leave a little while ago, I'd say about 15 minutes ago or so, and there was an arrest made. There was some pushing and shoving going on between protesters on this corner here on 3rd Street in Washington. Some pushing and shoving going on. An arrest was made. Just one young woman, we were able to report that she was taken away in a police cruiser a short time ago. The rest of the crowd was pushed by police down 3rd Street. Down towards Jefferson right now, and as you can see, there's not much going on at this point, and that's good news. If you've been following us for the last hour or so, you can tell by looking at this corner, it looks nothing like it did about 30-40 minutes ago, so that's the good news. Phoenix police certainly have this whole area under control at this point. A lot of the police congregating in the middle of the intersection, very little traffic, virtually no protesters left And that's the good news here, as police certainly have this whole situation under control, guys.
All right, Ryan, we'll be back to you in a little bit. Thanks. Alongside the echoes of protest came echoes of praise tonight as the president played to his supporters, all 19,000 of them, who filled the Phoenix Convention Center.
And there were thousands of supporters chanting for him outside as well. Team 12's Ryan Cody spoke to many of them, braving the heat to see the commander-in-chief.
All right, we'll come back to Ryan in just a few minutes, but right now let's go to Kevin Kennedy, who's ready to go. Kev?
Bit of activity taking place right here, right now. As you can see, they've opened up 2nd Street and Van Buren. The intersection is now flowing. There's still a large group of protesters that are still out here. And then obviously they're still on the other side of the street. There are a few police officers, but nothing like what we saw just maybe about 10, 15 minutes ago when the entire intersection on 2nd Street and Van Buren, police officers had all 4 corners kind of blocked off in a box type effect. There are still police officers out here, and there's still a group of protesters that are out here, but it's a much different scene than it was just a short time ago. Now, I can tell you, we go back about an hour, and boy, that's when stuff really became kind of chaotic. Not long after the president stopped speaking, it became a very dangerous situation. A lot of tear gas was thrown, a lot of flashbangs were thrown in the crowd when they were trying to get thousands of people to disperse, and slowly but surely, the crowd is dispersed except for this small group that you see over there on the corner right now. Probably about maybe 100 or so people, maybe a little bit less than 100. But police have kind of pulled back, figuring if they pull back, there's really not a whole lot for these protesters or these people out here to kind of to protest, if you will. So police are pulling back, and hopefully the people that are still out here will eventually pull back. But 2nd Street and Van Buren at least is open right now, and the crowd is much, much smaller than it was earlier this evening. Guys, I'll throw it back to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Kevin. Things looking like they're getting back to normal for the most part out there. That is good news. Well, the deployment of tear gas sent a lot of protesters running in the opposite direction, creating a little bit of a panic because some really just didn't know what was going on.
Had to be scary. Team 12's Charlie Edsity was on the ground when she heard the explosions happening. She joins us live now with the details of what she saw. Charlie?
Well, we were standing around 2nd Street and Monroe when we heard 2 loud bangs that sent several people, including myself, running in the opposite direction. Now, take a look at this video. This was the scene in the lobby of our building within the past hour. Medics treating a few people who were overcome by that tear gas. Now, the effects of the gas can be difficulty breathing, coughing, choking, even vomiting, and it can also affect your vision. Now, depending on the strength, it can last anywhere from 10 minutes to 2 hours. There was a lot of confusion and also panic about what had just happened when those loud bangs echoed through downtown, and it only took a few minutes before everyone began to smell and taste that tear gas.
Yeah, oh no, I didn't hear any of that. There was people chanting. And then some old people got gassed. Everyone got gassed. I had to help when all the my face is burning right now.
It's like a radius.
I don't even know if those people got out. The cloud was too thick.
And you just heard there from a couple of people who were overcome by that tear gas. Now, our 12 News crews took shelter inside the studio, but let me tell you, it became very difficult to breathe outside. My throat became irritated, and, I began coughing, so the effects were taking place very quickly. Now, this tear gas forced us to take shelter quickly, but, there were still a lot of people who were still hanging out on the street outside of our own studio, and so it was very surprising to see, despite the thick cloud of tear gas that was still hanging in the air in downtown, you can still kind of smell it right now. So I'm going to toss it back inside to you guys in the studio.
All right, Charlie, thanks. Our chief photographer, Chad Bricks, took some powerful images tonight. We just want to go through them because sometimes a still image can be more emotional and tell a story as well as, if not better, than video. And here you see a young lady obviously having water put on her face from the effects of tear gas, and the clouds of tear gas and pepper spray that was dispersed tonight because this crowd had thrown rocks and bottles, we're told, at police. An incredible show of police force tonight, and then later on a show of police restraint when it was needed. And again, Chad Bricks, our chief photographer, showing why he is the chief photographer and doing such a great job.
Right, and for the most part, this event, this president's visit, went off without a hitch, really. There were a lot of people out there, just a few that seemed to want to cause some trouble. And these are the images that you are seeing there.